This is the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar. Today we are in Mûr de Bretagne.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Lionel Birnie.
Hello, Richard.
Daniel Friebe.
Hello.
Where are we, Lionel?
We're outside the cider tent at the Mûr de Bretagne, not far from very rural Brittany, this, isn't it? And we've had a little glass of cider.
We were played in there, actually, by a pipe band that was playing at the finish. I felt very at home among my fellow Celts. The skirl of the pipes, the drums, very rousing it was.
Yeah, it's an area of France that's got a very distinctive character, isn't it? I love it here. I used to holiday here as a child. Great. Not on my own, I should hasten to add, with family. I didn't go on strange solo holidays as a child.
No, that's what you do now.
Wouldn't put it past him. Can I put in an early entry for the pedant de charme?
Oui.
The Mûr de Bretagne. It is not the Mûr de Bretagne. It is just Mûr de Bretagne. It isn't.
It's a bit like Ukraine. It's a bit like Ukraine. It's not the Ukraine.
Lionel looks absolutely incandescent.
Yeah, definitely. Pedant.
There's a volume of abuse coming.
Pedant sans charme for Daniel. Lionel, give us your daily roundup. I think we all hit the Mûr de Bretagne today. I think Saturday day, whatever it is. I think we all. It's difficult, isn't it? The Saturday. I don't know why this Saturday's true. I remember last year as well. It was very difficult, wasn't it? Because we punctured last year.
We did.
Speak for yourselves.
But Daniel, yeah.
In the Jaguar, maybe the mood has not been good, but
the mood in the Jaguar is excellent. Actually, it's just the fatigue is catching up with us all a little bit. Anyway, Lionel, sorry, give us a little roundup. Tell us the what, the why, the where, the when.
Okay, stage 8 of the tour went to Mûr de Bretagne.
Well done, Lionel.
Thank you. Won by an AG2R rider. Just as last year,
We're being more specific.
an AG2R rider called Alexis Vuillermoz. How's that, Daniel? Vuillermoz.
Very good.
Vuillermoz.
Not too bad. On the same stage last year, Belal Kadri won for AG2R. A little coincidence there. They were obviously getting into the groove on the second Saturday of the Tour de France. He timed it perfectly. Dan Martin mistimed it, really, took second on the stage. The big news really is that Vincenzo Nibali lost contact. Chris Froome had a few words to say about that in the press conference afterwards. Peter Sagan has taken the green jersey, and the Big 4 GC, which has been dormant for a few days, had its first change since Monday, with Nibali losing a few seconds there. So that's stage 8 of the 2015 Tour de France.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of these stages that quite interesting, but was never going to provide too much of a shake-up, was it? And we're all kind of looking forward to the team time trial. And then beyond that, the first rest day in the mountains, it felt a little bit like a transitional stage in a way. The Mûr, obviously at the end.
No, the Mûr. Just Mûr.
The wall at the end provided a bit of excitement. Daniel, what were your impressions of the stage?
Well, Vuillermoz is this year's Jean-Christophe Perrault, isn't he? Very, very similar stories, actually. Vuillermoz, like Perrault, came to professional cycling very late. He actually rode the Tour de France for Ciro Scognamiglio in 2013, about 6 months after turning pro on the road. And since then, really, he's had very good results. He's a punchy rider, as he showed today. He came third at the Mûr de Huy the other day. That is, you're allowed to call that the Mûr de Huy. And he is, someone who really has an awful lot of potential as a road rider. Typically, really, mountain bikers, very good mountain bikers. He has started his road career very quickly. These mountain bikers seem to come in and they have instant success. I think part of it is to do with the intensities at which they train at. They're very used to, and cyclocross riders as well, they're very used to training at very high intensities, and Vuillermoz seems to be in that category. He almost stopped his career actually at the end of 2013 after just a year in the pro ranks, because AG2R, Vincent Lavenue, the manager, wanted to take him, but their budget was already all used up, and a local entrepreneur in the Jura, in Dole, in the Jura, which is on the east side of France, kind of above the Alps, stumped. He thought this was a real shame that Vuillermoz was going to have to stop his career and that he had great potential. So a local entrepreneur actually paid his salary.
Is that still the case to this day? Or?
I guess he was on a 2-year contract, so that might well be the case. And a gentleman called Daniel, I think, let me just see, Germont. He had an IT company. He was an international runner in the 1960s. Became a kind of mentor for Vuillermoz, and he's been paying his salary, or he did pay his salary last year.
AG2R used to be a laughing stock of a team, didn't it? And in the last couple of years, they've just produced such an abundance of talent, and nothing. What's changed? This Vincent Lavenu has been in charge for years and years and years. So what's clicked for them?
Well, I think their scouting has been very successful. You know, they picked up Romain Bardet. Well, they started tracking him years and years ago. There was a story about him having followed the Classica San Sebastian around about 10 years ago in the team car of AG2R. So
when he was 7.
Well, roughly. So they were keeping tabs on him very early on. They picked up likes of Vuillermoz. Their feeder team in Chambry has been quite successful in turning out some very fine riders. Heard a story about that actually the other day. There's a young Colombian called Estrada, his surname is, and he was supposed to sign for Lampre, but he turned up to some physiological tests recently. I'm going very much off topic here, and he was kind of out of shape in ripped jeans, and they were not very impressed with what they saw at all, and they will not be signing him, I don't think.
Freddie Ovett, Steve Ovett's son, rides for the AG2R development team.
Right. Yes, of course.
And he is a former runner as well. Ran for a while in Oregon but in the company of the currently under fire Alberto Salazar group, and he's now living in France and riding for the AG2R team. And I interviewed him recently, and he had some pretty positive things to say about that setup and about cycling in general compared to athletics, vis-a-vis the doping issue, which was interesting. But he's apparently a talented climber and quite highly rated. Quite a few people are keeping an eye on him. We've been joined by popular request. He joined us a couple of nights ago, and he's back. Ciro Scognamiglio.
Hello, listeners. Ciao.
Ciao, Ciro. Now, this must be a busy evening for you because your man, Vincenzo Nibali, the real sort of talking point among the big 4, the big 5, or including Tejay Van Garderen and that now, I think. But he lost a bit of time on the climb. What's wrong with Nibali?
Yes, I mean, he hasn't for sure a good day. I spoke to him immediately after the finish line.
Of course.
Before he even crossed the line, wasn't it?
Exactly, because time is a shadow, this is my mission in this Tour de France and also maybe in my life. But yes, we have to consider that on this kind of climb, yes, 10 seconds, not only from Chris Froome, Nairo Quintana, Alberto Contador, Big 4, Big 5, other animals, because when we talk about Big 4, Big 5, we always think to the animals of South Africa, yes, for sure. Yes.
What?
No, yes,
So what are the? So
no,
those
in the Kruger Park, the beautiful natural park in South Africa, there are the Big 4, the Big 5. You can see the animals. Yes.
What are the Big 5?
No, I mean, Daniel, it's not interesting for me, but for a lot of people, they love to. But the topic is that Nibali lost 10 seconds from a lot of riders. I mean, I saw now the final classification of the stage, Martens, Izagirre, Roland, so definitely not a good day for him.
But Ciro, the fact that he lost time, he was dropped by people like Peter Sagan, does that not tell you that it wasn't really a typical climb? I mean, it wasn't necessarily a finish for climbers.
Yes, this is true, but he has already a disadvantage from Froome from Contador, and more or less for Quintana, more or less is the same time on Quintana in the GC. And in my opinion, now he can't afford to lose other times from them. And so for me, today is a defeat.
How is his Astana team ahead of the team time trial? They're in good shape, they're healthy. I heard Scarponi was a bit ill.
Scarponi is ill, certainly is not, gastrointestinal problems few days ago, and so certainly is not best shape. The team is not bad in my opinion, but the question is the ambience, I mean the moral of the team with the captain. Not.
There's always been a question about the morals of the Astana team.
Yeah, and it's difficult to understand now, to know what about their performance tomorrow. It won't be easy for them.
During the Tour de France, listen twice a day to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar. There is all the latest interviews and analysis from every stage in the evening show. And in the morning, Monday to Friday, Kilometer Zero will take you inside the Tour in the company of the podcast team, Richard Moore, Daniel Friebe and Lionel Birnie.
We should talk some more about today's stage and about Chris Froome, who's still in yellow, and the team time trial. But while you're here, Ciro, we should really ask you about the big news last night, which broke just after our podcast was recorded, concerning Luca Paolini.
Well, this time last night, Ciro was on the phone to Paolini because I think before the news had even broken, pretty much, Ciro rushed outside, got straight on the phone, and Paolini picked up.
Yes, in this case, it's better to phone immediately to the rider, because otherwise the rider simply shut the phone and stop. And also, Daniel, we have to say that, Richard, Lionel, you have to know this. Also, Daniel, in that moment, was talking to the phone. I don't know.
I was on the phone to Paolini's manager, Alex Carrera, who hadn't heard the news yet. So
did you bring
I was
it
the bearer of bad news, unfortunately.
And Paolini, how was he? What's his story?
And the story is that he tasted positive for cocaine yesterday. When I was talking to him, he was in a car. I was sure of that, and I was coming back home, leaving the tour. And for the moment, he didn't confess anything. The situation in Australia. After our conversation, he wrote a kind of paper on the social network. He said that he should clarify the situation as soon as possible. But Richard, the thing clear is that he tested positive for cocaine, and he's out of Tour de France.
And then, we should say, out of competition, the punishment for testing for cocaine is lenient. Tom Bonin has fallen foul of positive tests for cocaine 3 times, 4 times, 3 times.
3 times maybe?
Yeah, well, he's certainly more than once. But in competition, it's a serious offence. And he faces possibly up to a 4-year ban, is that correct?
Not sure about that. One thing
and he faces a lengthy ban.
Probably. Not sure about that. One thing I am sure about is that, well, fairly sure, is that Ciro's second call after Paolini was to friend of the podcast, Pippo Pozzato. No? Am I wrong?
Yes, but our listeners should know that for me it's normal, because to Filippo Pozzato, friend of our podcast, we talk every day, every single day of my life. I talk with Filippo.
Lionel, what were your thoughts? It's another doping headline. It's a confusing one, isn't it? Cocaine. What do we make? It's a lifestyle drug. I'll ask Ciro in a minute if there are rumours about Paolini and his lifestyle. He's 38 years old. If he is banned, you'd imagine this is the end of his career.
Well, yeah. If it's in competition, then it will carry the same sanction as any drug that is on the banned list. The question is, well, there's so many questions about it, but cocaine, whether or not it's performance enhancing, whether or not, whatever the circumstances are, the fact of the matter is that to test positive for it in competition is a no-no. Is a no-no. So that's it, and it's probably an open and shut case in that regard.
He's not the first rider to test positive for cocaine. As you mentioned, Tom Boonen has before. Another Italian rider who tested positive on multiple occasions was Mattia Gavazzi, who he certainly had an addiction. He admitted to having an addiction, but I interviewed him a couple of years ago at the Giro, and he was very adamant that it was a common problem in the peloton. I'm not sure I believe that. I think it's probably as prevalent in the peloton as it is in every other strata of society. I don't think there's necessarily a big problem with cocaine in the peloton.
Marco Pantani as well, of course, had dealt cocaine addiction. Ciro, are you aware of a problem in the peloton?
I have no elements to say something like that. And yesterday we talked with our newspaper, and if you look at the list of all sportists, they were tested positive for cocaine. It's an incredible list.
Tell us about Paolini when you spoke to him. What was he angry? Was he upset? Was he sad? What was it? What were his emotions?
Sad, but frustrating. But in my opinion, the real adjective, because Richard, words are important, he was confused.
He doesn't know. He couldn't find an explanation. So that sounds to me like he was in denial that he had taken cocaine knowingly.
Exactly. And maybe I had also the impression, certainly the news arrived to him maybe 1 hour before that I talked to him to the phone, and maybe yesterday and maybe also now. He doesn't still know what he has to do now. I can add for our listeners, they are the first to know this, that he has still to choose the lawyer. He will choose on Monday a lawyer for this case.
And now, le pédaleur de charme, supported by British Eurosport.
Okay, it's time for our British Eurosport presented Peddler de Charme, or the Daily Peddler de Charme. Last night's Peddler de Charme was Andre Greipel. He's also in the green jersey, and that makes him quite difficult to get to at the stage start. So we failed, unfortunately, in our mission to present him with the Peddler de Charme t-shirt this morning, but we will keep trying, and we will get him at some point once he's out the green jersey now, so it'll be easier. Peter Sagan is in the green jersey. So today's Peddler de Charme, a few nominations for the guys in the breakaway. Adam Yates, who attacked on the climb, but we're going to give it to somebody who was spotted stealing a bottle from a Francis Tejay rider, taking out his bottle cage and throwing it at the crowd. A cheeky little stunt. And that was
throwing it at the crowd, throwing it into the crowd,
for the crowd. And it was our old friend Brian Cockard. And we will give him a Peddler de Charme t-shirt, not a Brian Cockard t-shirt. Sadly, we don't have any of those with us, I don't think, do we?
We've talked a lot about bottles and throwing, stealing in the last few days. I got a message from someone today who knows Chris Froome very well, who took great exception to our claim yesterday, or our suggestion that Vincenzo Nibali would beat Chris Froome in a fight. This person was quite sure that Chris Froome would have...
I wonder who this person was. But let me tell you that Lionel and I went to the Team Sky Hotel last night. We did a long interview with Sir Dave Brailsford and also with Chris Froome. We spoke to Brailsford in his own motorhome, and we met Chris Froome in the Team Scar dining car, and I asked him that very question: who would win in a fight between him and Vincenzo Nibali? So these extended interviews, we'll be playing little clips from them in tomorrow night's podcast, but the extended full-length hour-long show will be available to friends of the podcast only. Sign up at thecyclingpodcast.com. £5 for the year. That will gain you access to all our friends specials. That will be available on Monday's rest day at some point behind our paywall, so it'll give you something to chew over during the rest day. But both very interesting. Froome was pretty open and candid about what's changed with him. Brailsford talked a lot about motorhomes, but sounds like a minor point, but he was actually making a bigger and sort of more important point in his view anyway. So it was a very interesting evening, wasn't it, Lionel?
Yeah, it was. I think the motorhome has got a lot of attention because the UCI banned teams from using them. Chris Froome, we assume, would have been in one of those vehicles, sleeping in there as if it was his hotel room each night, moving around the Tour de France. But having seen it, I can see that this is the future. This is what is going to happen in cycling, and Sky will be they won't be the only team that adopts it early. Other big budget teams will adopt it, and I'm sure that for a while there'll be some grumbling about a two-tier system of haves and have-nots, but there will be bonuses for the smaller teams as well, in that they will then perhaps get a slightly better hotel accommodation, and then in the sort of longer term, every team will be doing this. It's just going to happen because there are so many benefits to just sleeping in the same environment every day, rather than having to pack and unpack a suitcase and everything being in a different place every day. You're basically taking a sort of you're travelling around in your own environment rather than being at the kind of whim and mercy of French hotels. Not that French hotels are terrible, but there are some bad ones.
Some of them are.
Last night's was not a good one, to be honest, for Sky, was it?
Well, the other big revelation from Dave Brailsford was that he's going for a bike ride with old Tinkoff at some point soon. Yep.
No, Richard, nothing to do about what we were talking about, but unfortunately I have to go because I have to investigate more about Nibali's case of today. But just a really quick thing, Richard. I was talking about this with Daniel Friebe some days ago. I was talking about the fact that in this Tour de France, a lot of new podcasts born in this Tour de France. But I have to say to our listeners that we are the first podcast and we are by far the best one. So I did nothing more.
While you were delivering that monologue, Ciro he's now jogging away. But while he was delivering that monologue, he was holding my hand. Did you notice that? That was rather sweet.
He's got a unique running style, hasn't he, as well, Ciro? He's like a little elfin character, isn't he?
He ain't no Usain Bolt. Any other conclusions from today before we look ahead to tomorrow? I spoke to Greg Van Avermaet, who was 5th on today's stage, rides for BMC, teammate of Tejay Van Garderen. Van Garderen up to 3rd overall. A lot of people tipping him to be in yellow jersey tomorrow night. Peter Sagan is 2nd at 11 seconds. Van Garderen 3rd at 13 seconds. Any other conclusions from today, though, Daniel?
No, I mean, it was more time lost for Thibaut Pinot, but we're kind of used to that now, aren't we? I had a chat with one of the FDJ team's coaches this morning, Fred Grapp. He was very optimistic, but Fred Grapp is someone who'd probably be optimistic if Thibaut Pinot was in the broom wagon, and Fred would probably be telling us that he would win the Tour de France, the Vuelta, and the World Championships from the broom wagon. But they're very adamant that they can reboot Pinot and he can come back into the reckoning for the general classification. Obviously not to win.
Rebooting him, just switching him off and on again on the resting.
Obviously not to win the Tour de France, but to save face really and perhaps win a stage in the last week.
Yeah, I thought Chris Froome's comments afterwards were quite interesting in that he said he was surprised that Nibali had lost contact on that climb, considering it was a sort of cross headwind, which makes it easier to stay in the wheels. And Froome was at the front, looking pretty good, but not really sort of giving it everything, I don't think. But he rode it very smartly. He rode it tight to the right-hand barrier, so he was keeping himself out of trouble and forcing people to come round into the wind. It was an interesting finish, but it wasn't quite the sort of explosive finish that we perhaps had hoped for.
I mean, he's very visible. He's in the yellow jersey. That's kind of the point of the yellow jersey. But he's very visible, and some of the other overall contenders are not really. Contador is somebody you expect to be jumping away, sort of, standing on the pedals, making moves on a climb like that. He's been pretty invisible so far.
He has. Heard some interesting information today about his equipment choices, which we've discussed previously in the podcast. His mechanic, Fausto Munoz, is a real sort of maverick genius. He's been with Contador since the start of his career at Once. He's quite obsessive about tyres and tyre width and tyre pressure. He usually likes to pump Contador's tyres up almost to the point where they're exploding. He rides at about 11 bars. Usually his tyres are inflated too, which I think some of the people at Specialized who supply Contador's team with tyres are not too thrilled with sometimes. And I learned today that Contador he did the complete opposite on the day of the pavé on the cobbles. He had tyres inflated to 4 bar that day.
Wow.
Which is pretty much like a punctured football, isn't it?
Lionel and I would be getting impact punctures with that sort of pressure, wouldn't we?
Definitely, yeah.
But maybe Contador can get away with it more than we can.
When you guys have spoken about 4 bars on this tour, you've meant something entirely different, haven't you? You've been referring to the average night.
No, not quite. But there were we had a couple of pints of left last night, didn't we, Lionel? Maybe a mistake.
Yeah, that was a mistake, particularly so late at night and after a very late dinner. But yeah, I think the mood in the Tinkoff-Saxo camp is pretty good. I saw Sean Yates briefly this morning and asked him how, because we'd seen that Oleg Tinkoff had been riding substantial parts of the stages each day, and I said, does the atmosphere in the team change? Is there more pressure around when Tinkoff is around? And he said, oh no, it's fine, and he's going home tomorrow, and then he's coming back for the last week, but he's been riding his bike quite a lot, so he's pretty tired, and that's quieting down a bit.
Well, I think Brailsford's riding with him on the second rest day, so we'll maybe try and join them for that, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, we should wrap up there. Just a note to listeners, don't forget that you can subscribe on iTunes to the Cycling Podcast to get all our latest episodes delivered directly to your device. And if you do enjoy the show and like what we're doing, please drop us a rating or review on iTunes as well. That would be nice. That's about all for today. Thank you to all the people that helped produce the Cycling Podcast. Thank you to you for listening. We're back with a regular podcast Sunday evening of the Team Time Trial, and also Kilometre Zero Mondays to Friday. Lionel.
Thank you very much, Richard. We're looking forward to the Team Time Trial, are we? It's going to be an exciting one, much more exciting than normal, surely, with the uphill finish at the end and teams depleted left, right and centre.
Yeah, same uphill finish as the first stage of the 2008 Tour de France finished on. That historic Tour de France, because it was the first one I did in the company of Daniel Friebe.
Was it? The Côte de Cadoudal, isn't it? It's also... stage finish there in 1997, won by Eric Zabel, with Frank van den Broek going quite close behind him, which maybe the fact that Eric Zabel won their sprinter might give you some idea of how difficult it is or isn't. Any news on Alex Dowsett, by the way, because there's a lot of I guess some money going on BMC, but a lot of people piling in behind BMC saying that they're the favourites. I think Movistar are going to surprise a lot of people tomorrow.
Yeah, I think they'll go well. I mean, Dowsett was looking pretty sorry and sounding pretty sorry for himself a few days ago after his crash on stage 4, the cobbled stage. He had a big cut in his elbow, which required a couple of stitches, and he was talking about how when he rode up alongside, he couldn't see the wound on his, because it's on the underside of his forearm near his elbow, and he rode up alongside the team car, and Eusebio Unzue, the sports director of Movistar, kind of gave a, it's just a scratch kind of look, and then said, but you might need a couple of stitches. And obviously Dowsett's a haemophiliac, so I mean there are serious implications to him sort of losing blood, but he got through. He said he was feeling pretty bashed up, but fortunately where he places his arms on the rests for the tri-bars, shouldn't have any trouble with the wound, and a few days have passed now, and I'm not being sort of glib about it, but it will probably have healed up enough for him to be able to ride okay in the Team Time Trial.
Well, let's head over in that direction now, shall we, chaps? Daniel?
To where?
To Van.
Okay, yeah.
Van. Towards Van for the start of the Team Time Trial.
Yeah.
Daniel.
Podium tomorrow, BMC, Movistar.
Still wanting to...
Yeah, I'm quite excited about this. I love time trials, as you say, as you've always known.
Podium. Only one team goes on the podium at the end. No, only one in a stage of any race.
1-1.
If we're going to be
pedant
de charme, only one.
So when you say podium, you want to identify the nine riders.
Has Lionel won the pedant sans charme in the 90th minute or in injury time?
Certainly, we're in extra time now. Yeah.
Well, BMC, okay, forget podiums. BMC are going to win, followed by Sky, followed by Movistar, and it's going to be very close.
I would agree with that, but when you've got to play the long game, Daniel. You get one in early, and I've got the rest of the match to get level.
I think Cofidis are going to win.
Who are going to finish? No. Do you think they'll finish last? They might well do, mightn't they? Bretagne, Séché.
I mean, Cofidis, Orica, Green Edge. Or poor old Orica, Green Edge. I think Michael Matthews only still here to ride the Team Time Trial. He can barely move.
He is, exactly. And watching him get on his bike 2 mornings ago was very... I almost wanted to go forward and help him. I mean, he couldn't really lift his leg properly, and his whole sort of upper body seemed to look in a lot of pain, and he is. That's all he's doing. He's here because the time will be taken on the 5th rider across the line. Although I gather that discussions have taken place, and if for any reason, if Orica had been reduced down to 4, they would still be allowed to ride the stage, and they would have just been given whatever time.
I think Tinkoff-Saxo will do in Team Time Trial.
It's Fergie. It's a lot of injury time in this podcast, isn't it? It's Fergie time, this is. How will they do? I think they'll do well. Bjarne Riis, actually, who is a pundit on this Tour de France on Danish TV, has as incongruous as that may sound. He thinks they'll do very well. But he would think that, wouldn't he? Because they're kind of his riders.
Outside chance to put Sagan in yellow for the first time in his career, no?
I think there's a better chance of BMC winning by enough to put Van Garderen in yellow.
I think Van Garderen yellow is what we're expecting, isn't it, tomorrow evening? Well, let's leave it there, chaps. Lionel, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
For the best analysis, discussions and interviews from the 2015 Tour de France, listen to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar.